you paying attention now? There's a lot of heartwarming things that'll be thought about hopefully today, and I hope that you will take it for what it is, and that you will tune in today and engage in what we're talking about, because life is most definitely short, is it not? How many of you guys are parents of adults that have moved out of the house, right? And now you know what that video means. You know what I'm talking about when life is short and how fast time tends to go by. And if we're not careful, we'll miss out on some of the most important times. So I'm so thankful that you're here. If you're here in person, if you're joining us online, we're so grateful that you've chosen to be a part of part 4 of Family Practices. If you've missed any of this series, I really encourage you to go back and check it out online, because I feel like that one of the things that I love to talk about is family and parenting and the idea of making things better, because regardless, we all have practices in our families, even if we don't purposefully put them into practice, right? We all have practices in our families to where they're going to either be created by us or they're just going to get created by default. And so what we want to be is intentional when it comes to practicing what God's called us to practice in our families, so that hopefully and our faith pushes us towards believing that we're going to produce what God wants us to produce in our family. So if you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and open up to Ephesians chapter 6. We'll be getting that here in just a few minutes, but Ephesians chapter 6. We've been talking a little bit. We've talked to the parents. We've talked about marriage. We're going to talk a little bit to the parents and to kids today, and I'll tell you the reason why I kind of combined those here in just a few minutes. But I want to ask you a question first as we get started. Have you ever packed a bag for your kids or a kid? Have you ever packed a bag before? Have you ever packed a bag to go spend the night for vacation? Yeah, show of hands. How many of you guys have ever packed a bag? Isn't it great? Don't you love packing? Like before you go on vacation, isn't that one of the most exciting parts of anything you do is packing? Like packing a bag is frustrating, but if you've ever packed a bag before, you know the frustration that comes along with it. Now, if you have packed a bag before, you probably fall up underneath 1 to 4 categories, all right? Number 1, you're possibly the OCD packer. You're the OCD packer. Everything is packed in a specific order, in a specific place, with outfits matching and packed in the order of the days they will be worn, right? Everything has its place, and there's possibly even a checklist that you've used to make sure that you haven't forgotten anything. There's some of you guys know that you are the OCD packer. When you pack your kids' stuff, they have to be in a certain place. And if your kids ever get a hold of that suitcase before you leave, it frustrates you because you have to repack it because they've messed up your order of your packing, right? That's number 1. Number 2, you could possibly be the overpacker, the person who is worried that you won't have what you need, so you grab everything possible in your house and you put it in your kids' suitcase, thinking for 1 second that there probably won't be a Walmart anywhere close by in case we forget something, a Dollar General, anything, and we overpack everything. Maybe you're that person. Or you might possibly fall in category 3, I don't care packer. You're the I don't care packer, right? You grab as little as possible for your kids and don't really care what you grab as long as they have something to wear and brush their teeth with. And that's even pushing it, because sometimes they have to brush their teeth with their finger, right? You're the I don't care packer. You're like, man, hey, I've got my stuff. I'll get something for them. Like they're not, and like what they're wearing is not quite as important. I don't have to worry about what they're wearing. They don't have to look cute because I'm not going to post this on Instagram. We're just going one night, right? You're the I don't care packer. Most men fall into that category. And then, like, if you're ever meeting your wife and your kids put on the clothes that you packed for your kids, your wife goes, what in the world are you wearing? And they say, well, Daddy packed it for me. And they're like, of course he did. Of course he did. Or you just fall up underneath the last and final category. Pack your own stuff. Pack your own stuff. If you don't have what you need, it's your fault. If your kids don't have what they need, then it's their fault. If their suitcase is empty, if they forget their suitcase, if they don't have what, you look at them and you blame them and you know that it's their fault. But no matter what, it is always a process to figure out what's going in the bag. It's always a process to figure out what's going on in the bag. You can even take this a step further, and it doesn't even include your kids. It may just include you when you're trying to consider what you're going to take on a trip. It's a process of laying things out. It's a process. It takes effort to figure out what's going on or what's going into the bag. Reggie Joyner's a family pastor up on the north side, and he said that when his daughter got pregnant, they were preparing their nursery, and he brought them a suitcase, and he asked them to put this in the nursery. And his daughter was very confused and said, "Why in the world would you want me to put this suitcase in their nursery?" He said, I don't want you to just put it in there. I want you to keep it in there. I want you to keep this suitcase in the nursery for a constant reminder." And she just kind of looked at him confused, like, "Why in the world would you want me to put this suitcase in the nursery?" Like, we're doing our nursery. You know how you are, especially when you have your first kid. Like, you want the nursery to be perfect, and you think it's going to stay that way, which is almost comical when we think that. And like parents that have more than one kid, or their kids are older, they're like, "Oh, that's cute. You know, it's not going to stay that way." And so it's just kind of one of those, like, I don't want this junking up my nursery. Like, we've got it set up, and we're ready. And she said, "Dad, why do you want me to keep this in our nursery?" And he said to her, "Because as soon as you bring your new baby home, you are going to be packing a bag until the day that they leave you. As soon as you bring your new baby home, you're going to be packing a bag until they leave you. You will be putting things into their bag to prepare them for life. You will be putting things into their bag that they will be taking with them to encounter everything that's going to come after them when they're outside of your realm of protection. When they're outside or out from underneath your umbrella of covering. You are packing their bag." And I want it to serve as a reminder that every time you walk into that nursery, that what you put into their bag matters. What you put into their bag, it matters. It's a big, big deal. What we have in our bags impacts us more than we know. Because we all, seriously, metaphorically speaking, we all have a bag. Our parents, whether they knew it or not, packed us a bag. As a matter of fact, there are some times when your kids have done something crazy or they're acting up in public, like you don't know how to get them not to act up, or you don't know how to get them to behave, or maybe they've hit that teenage stage and you're wondering how to get them to respond or listen to you, and you're wondering how to do this, and you're like, "Man, I've used everything I've got in my bag," and then you kind of reach deep in your bag and you grab that one thing that you swore that you never would use, that your parents used on you, and you're just kind of grabbing at a last resort because it didn't work on you. You're just hoping it's going to work on them. But you've got a bag. You've got a bag. And your bag was packed by your parents. Good or bad, it was packed by your parents. Intentional or unintentional, your bag was packed by those who influenced you most. Whether you had great parents and they constantly tried to invest in you, or whether you had horrible parents and they neglected you, that's what packed your bags. And we need to know this as parents. Now, as kids, I need you to listen up. Typically, we have about 6th through 12th grade in here. Maybe you're a young adult. You need to understand this. And to be honest with you, we're all children, right? Like, raise your hand if you had a mother. Okay? So that clear that up, right? We're all kids. We're all children. Right? We all have people that impact us in this way, so we can all kind of relate to this. But now, as kids, we only have a certain amount of time to receive the resources that is put into our bag. So if you look at it as a positive influence, like if you have parents that are trying to fill your bags full of tools that you will use in your life, we need to understand that we've only got, as kids, a limited amount of time to receive all that we can from our parents. And a lot of times we don't really recognize that it is what it's supposed to be until it's too late, or when it's getting close to the end of the time where our bag is almost packed and we're like, no, I didn't soak in everything I needed to soak in yet. And if we're not careful, we'll miss out on the opportunity to be able to soak in as much as we can. As adults, we're responsible not only of keeping our own bags packed, but we're responsible for packing their bags. This is a huge, huge responsibility. It's bigger than just going on vacation or our kids going to spend a night at a friend's house and making sure they have what they want. This is us preparing our children for life. This is us making sure that they can learn how to play the game without us being right over their shoulder and hovering over them and telling them what decision to make. You know what one of the hardest things to do as a parent? You know this. If you're a parent, you know what I'm about to say. One of the hardest things to do as a parent is to let them make a mistake. Especially nowadays. One of the hardest things to do as a parent is to stand right there when you know you can say, no, don't do that. Do it this way. One of the hardest things to do as a parent is to let them make a mistake. Another hard thing to do as a parent is to let them do things differently than you do them. And that needs to be one of the tools in their bag. It needs to be one of those things where you say, hey, look, it's okay if you don't do it my way. Have you ever asked, and I've used this before, but have you ever asked a group of men to do something at your house? Like if I was to say, hey, guys, we need to tear down this wall. We need to blow this wall out. The church is busting at the seams, and we need to blow the wall out. We need more room for people to sit. And we get 4 guys in here, and I said, we need to tear this wall down. And I don't appoint one of them as the leader. Every one of them will have an opinion of how we're supposed to take that wall down. And every one of them will think that their opinion is right. It's not that there is more than one opinion. My opinion is the only opinion. And that's how we operate. But unfortunately, that's kind of how we operate as parents too. Hey, you need to know this. And it comes from a good place, right? It comes from we want to love you. We want to give you everything that we can. We want to teach you. But in the reality of it is if you never allow someone to fail, they'll never realize what they need to do to get better. And here's the crazy thing, is when you start to realize that your kids might just know a better way of doing it than you do. And you need to learn from them. It's kind of a mutual respect. It's what God's called us to. It's where God's called us to be. But as kids, we only have a limited amount of time to accept what's being put into our bags. And as adults, we only have a limited amount of times to pack the bag. The tension comes when we neglect to understand how much time we have to let our parents pack our bags or how much time we have as parents to pack a bag. We don't fully comprehend what this time is or what it means. And here's the truth that you need to understand. Here's the truth that we need to comprehend. No one has the potential to influence kids like their parents. No one has the potential to influence their kids like their parents. Even if you don't show up as a parent, you influence your kid more than you could possibly know. No one has the influence that you have as a parent. No one. Because that's the way God made it. And if you don't like it, Chris, what about these people who have been adopted, or what about these people who have been in families to where, love is present in that family? It's still like, man, that's an incredible thing. Those are good things. Those children had someone step in and be the parent, not just play a parent role. They were the parent. And their other parent, whether it was a good thing that they gave them up for adoption or whether it was one of those things that needed to happen, whatever it may be. But regardless, their birth parents has an influence. They have an influence just by being their birth parents, even if it's to the point where I wonder who my mom is. I wonder who my birth father is. They have an impact on the life. And we need to understand this. This is how valuable this is. Something else we need to understand. As kids, your time at home is limited, so you need to soak in as much as you can. Even if it's a negative sense, like even if it's one of those things where, hey, this is a negative presence in my life. This is a negative thing in my life. I don't like being at home. My dad's an alcoholic, or my mom's addicted to drugs, or my dad skipped town, or my mom skipped town, whatever it may be. You need to soak in as much as you can to understand, hey, this is not how I want to be when I grow up. And if that's what it's going to be, if this is the way life is, and I know this is how it's going to be, I know that when I have kids, it's going to be much different. And I'm going to make sure that I don't let them put any of that junk in my bag. But we all have these bags, and there's all a limited amount of time. So let me put it into a little bit of perspective for you, okay? We all have 1,000 weeks to pack a bag for your child from when you bring a baby home to when they graduate. on average, 1,000 weeks. And what we want people to understand is that whenever a week goes by, matter of fact, Reggie Joyner actually does this as a practice when he's counseling with people or doing conferences or whatever, but he says that they encourage people to fill a jar up with 1,000 marbles, rocks, whatever, pennies, whatever you want to do it, and every time a week goes by, to take a rock out, to take a marble out, and realize that it's a countdown clock. That you have 1,000 weeks until that child turns 18. You've heard me say this statistic before, but by the time your child graduates, they will have spent 80% of the amount of time that they will spend with you at that moment in their life as a parent. 80%. The other 20% happens after graduation. 20%. But as the weeks go by, you take one out and you think, man, what did we do to influence their life? What did we do to impact their life? What direction did we push them in? What did we teach them this week? Because there's not 1,000 weeks left anymore. What did we give them to use in their bag? What did we give them to pack in their bag? What did we teach them about how to make friends? What did we teach them about how important it is to know the Lord? What did we teach them about how it is to respect your parents and to be somebody that influences people and impacts this society instead of just being a consumer of everything that comes out? That you're not just a consumer in this family, that you are someone that can impact this family and that can influence this family. That every week goes by, there's a marble that's taken out. Every week goes by, it's a countdown clock. It's the sands flowing by. It is time that goes by. It's phases that you see in your kid's life, and you don't even realize it. The sad part is you don't realize how fast it goes by until it's almost gone. Every week that goes by, we get 1,000 weeks to impact their lives so that they will live well as an adult. When you actually put a number to it, your days, when you think about how many days you have, how many weeks you have, especially with your kids, it kind of puts things into perspective, doesn't it? But this is nothing new. We always tend to work harder. We always tend to work harder when we see the jar getting empty. When we see the light at the end of the tunnel or the finish line coming, we always tend to say, oh man, we're going to work harder. We're going to cram this in. And here's where things get a little jumbled up. I'm going to share some things with you here in just a few minutes to where if we get all this jumbled up, that it won't be as impactful. Sometimes we hit like age 12 with our kids and we think, oh, now I'm going to start teaching them right from wrong. When that should have happened between 0 and 5 years old. And we try to backstep, or we've been an absentee father and we're trying to step in and we're trying to make up for lost time, and their bag has already been packed full of some stuff that maybe you need to help them sift through. And God shows grace in that area. I want you to know that. God has the ability to overcome those things, but it doesn't mean that their bag hasn't been packed some before you showed up. Whether it's physically or metaphorically, like, hey, I'm finally showing up as a parent. I'm finally going to start saying, hey, this is what we need to do. And here's the crazy thing. Your kids, we get upset when this happens, but your kids won't be receptive of some kind of new trend or some kind of new habit you're trying to put into your family at first. And then you get frustrated because you think they're just supposed to all of a sudden turn a switch and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to eat healthy now. Mom, you've been buying me Cokes and candy like for the first 8 years of my life, and all of a sudden they're nowhere in our house because you've decided to go gluten-free, whatever the world gluten is, right? And it's like, well, we're gonna turn over this new leaf and we're gonna do this, and you're trying to make good decisions for your family, but you got to understand there's got to be some grace for them too, because you're packing their bags, and what you're really teaching them is not necessarily how to eat healthy, is that, hey, sometimes we've got to make changes in our lives to get better. And it's not always easy, and sometimes, yeah, you just kind of rip the Band-Aid off, and some other times it's like, man, you got to go slow, pour some water on it so it doesn't pull the hair out of your arm, right? It's like one of those things where you got to understand that it's going to take some time. But we have to make sure that this is important enough to us for us to put effort towards it. This is nothing new. Moses spoke about it in Psalm. Listen to this. In the Psalms, Moses said this, teach us to number our days. Verse 12, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to understand that this life here on earth isn't forever. Eternity is forever. But this life that we have to make an impact, not just on our kids, but on anybody that we come in contact with, is not forever. But especially when it comes to our kids, the thing that God orchestrated before he ever orchestrated the church, he orchestrated the family. He orchestrated this family unit between Adam and Eve. And he said, hey, this is good. This is a good thing. The church shouldn't be in charge of raising your children. The church shouldn't be in charge of teaching them who God is. You see them every day. You are impacting them every day. You are the biggest influence they're going to have. They need to get that from you. Church needs to be a celebration. We don't got to go to church. We get to go to church. That's why it's important for you to find a church home. Hey, let me just tell you this. Never would I encourage you to try to find a church that tells you what you want to hear, because you don't need that. You need to be at a church that tells you what Scripture says. Okay? That's number one. But number two, if you're in a church that you're doing this all the time, go somewhere else. You walk out of our church and you trip over another church when you walk out of our church. Okay, there's plenty of churches around Henry County. Find a church that's going to be able to invest in your family, but make sure it's a Bible-preaching church, that they preach Jesus as Lord. But don't put yourself, oh, well, my parents went here and their parents went here, so we've got to go here. What does that mean? Like, if you go down the road long enough, some of your parents didn't even have vehicles. You going to start walking everywhere too? It makes zero sense whatsoever. It's like not even logical. But it's this idea that we want to make sure that God is where he needs to be, and that we are looking at the number of our days, and that we come together as a church and we celebrate the times we get to come together, and our kids look forward to coming and being a part of this, because we're around other people. They're going to love one another, and that this is a result of how well we're doing in our family lives. It doesn't mean we're doing 100% great. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It just means that we're trying, we're working hard to make sure that our house is founded on the Lord. Now, is there any ninth graders in here? Ninth graders, got a couple here. Anybody else? Other ninth grader? Okay, we got a few of them in here. So check this out. This will hit you parents a little bit differently here. So if you're a ninth grader, your weeks are numbered. This is more towards your glass. You have about 200 weeks left with your ninth grader. You can cry now. There's some tissues around here somewhere. I looked at Kanette while the video was playing, and she was wiping her eyes like, oh goodness, I didn't know we were starting off this sentimental. But you have about 200 weeks left with your parents. Parents, you have about 200 weeks left with your ninth grader. And this is kind of how it's going to play out. In about 10 weeks, they're going to figure out where their locker is. And then they're going to decide what tribe they're going to be a part of, who they're going to hang out with. In their first 10 weeks of being a ninth grader, they'll figure all this stuff out. In about 20 weeks, they will take their first midterm or exam, and it will count for about 30 to 40% of their grade. And after that, they'll decide whether Yale or Princeton is on or off for their future. In about 50 weeks, they're going to go to the DMV, and they're going to get their license. And your prayer life is going to grow by leaps and bounds. This is what's going to happen in about 50 weeks. I would stop, but it wouldn't make any sense for me to stop because it's on my notes. 75 weeks in, there's a large percentage of them will get their first job, and they will get their first paycheck. But don't think for a second, parents, that this will save you a dime. This will most likely cost you money in some way, form, or fashion. But they'll get their first job, and they'll realize what it's like to work. They'll realize what it's like to be a part of that. There's a large percentage of the kids that'll do that, and they'll start understanding money a little bit more. In the first 100 weeks About halfway there, they will enter their junior year, and things will start moving at warp speed. They'll start driving a car alone and going on dates with someone else in the car by themselves. Side note, technology is really advanced nowadays, and they make small cameras that you can put in your cars, tracking devices for phones. At about 130 weeks, they're going to take the SAT. Half of them will retake the SAT. And then eventually, you'll see them walk across the stage in their caps and their gowns. And before you know it, you've lost all your marbles. And they will begin to proceed into their adult life with a bag that's been packed for them by you. And they will walk around with this bag, and anytime they need some type of tool, they'll reach into this bag and they'll hope that it's going to be there. And one of the biggest tools that they'll need is to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that no matter who tells them any differently, that God is love and you love them. Just weeks that pass us by. And the bag will get packed regardless of whether you choose to pack it or not, because we not only need our parents' influence in our lives, we also need other influences in our lives. And where they choose to get those other influences are directly impacted by the influence that we have on their life. So, it's important for us to recognize the phases and stages of our lives and the lives of our children so that we can squeeze out as much as we can to make these phases count. Because as much as you would like to keep them from growing older, and as much as you thought that old joke when you were growing up, well, you can't turn 7, I want you to stay 6, was so lame when you were growing up, now you understand. I just don't want you to get any bigger. I had a pastor speak into my life one time, and I loved what he said. He spoke in my life, and he said, Chris, I would never go up to my kids. Every year that we talked to them, I'd never go up to them and say, man, I dread these teenage years. I would never walk up to him and say, man, I'm worried about you turning 16. I would never go up to him and say those things. I would never dread the years. As a matter of fact, I would go up to him and I would say, hey, look, this is going to be the best year yet. And I wanted to speak life into them, and I wanted them to know that I was there for them, that they could talk to me about anything, that there was nothing I hadn't heard of, especially as being a pastor, that I could tell them some stories that would probably make them turn red. You know, it's like these ideas that they think that we just can't talk to you because we can't mess up. Because you expect us to be perfect, because your identity as a parent is determined by how perfect your kids are. It should never be that way. We got to recognize these phases of our lives that we go through. I would encourage you, if you get a chance, this is just kind of a side note, I would encourage you to check out this link. We'll put it up on the screen, but I would encourage you to go to this website. There's some books that these guys wrote about every stage of your kid's life and some key questions to ask during these stages, and also some intellectual things that you need to make sure that they know, some tools to put in their bag by the time they're out of these stages. And there's one for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth. There's a ton of these little booklets that kind of, they've spent time doing this. I get asked all the time, Chris, what do you do during the week? You know, and for years I've tried to figure out the best way to answer that without slapping somebody in the face. Like, what do you do during the week? I mean, I know you preach on Sunday, but what do you do during the week? And here, like, I was thinking about this last night, and especially when I was looking over this stuff, I thought about this. I spend my week studying the things that you don't have time to study to give you the cliff notes so that you can figure out how to do it on your own. And I work really hard at this, and it's a desire for me to make sure that you have a stepping stool to live life well and to live it in a God-honoring way. And that's what these guys did. They put all of this, when it came to kids, it's us going and saying, hey, what did you learn? Because you have put your specific focus on learning how these kids act, react, and the stages that they go through and how we can be better parents. And so what I'm saying is this is a great tool for you to get it if you're willing to put forth the effort so that you can make sure that their bag is packed the way that it needs to be. So as we go through these stages and we think about these stages, here's something that a pastor kind of fed into to some notes of mine and into my life that I feel like is kind of important and maybe a little bit informative, okay? But here's a quick overview of some stages that we go through to put things into a little bit of perspective as well. This first phase that we go through is the discipline years. The discipline years. This is parenting 0 to 5 years old. And this is what I was talking about before, to where if you get these out of order, if you try to put the discipline years when they're 12 to 18 years old, it's going to be a whole lot more difficult. It's like having a puppy, right? And you're trying to train that puppy. If you let it get to be a full-grown dog, they're just going to pee everywhere, right? But if you can train them while they're a puppy, then it's a different story. A little bit of a different story. What I'm trying to say is your kid's going to pee everywhere if you don't potty train him when he's younger, all right? During this stage, we begin to teach our kids that there are consequences to their behavior. There are consequences to their behavior. So here's the modern mentality, the societal mentality is that all people are good at the core. And there may be some of you who believe that. And I don't want to start any arguments or anything like that, but if you do, you're wrong. And I'm not meaning that even in like a jab way. I'm just saying, like, you just maybe don't know what I'm about to tell you. But society believes that all people are good to the core and are like generally good. Even if they make a bad decision, they're good. They've labeled drunkenness as a disease, right? They've labeled these like someone who steals something that maybe they didn't have a good childhood. Someone who hurts other people like they maybe have been hurt in the past. And I'm not saying that any of that stuff is not true, but it's not the root cause. It's more of a symptom. The reality is that none of us are good. We're all sinners. And one of the things that you and I both need to realize is that when we got given that little baby boy or that little baby girl, is they were imperfect and they were born a sinner. I didn't have to teach my kids how to cheat, how to steal, how to take, how to say mine. They just know, because we've all been that way. So inherently, we're not all good, but that's what society wants to tell us. Society wants to tell us that, hey, everybody's generally good, so let's see why they're so bad. And we go into all of this, the Sigmund Freud stuff that we want to talk about, psychological stuff, and we start labeling things. And what we really need to just stop for a second. I'm not saying that stuff isn't good and a good thing to start understanding, but what we need to understand is this, that we're sinners that need the grace of God. And when the grace of God enters our life, it truly enters our life, there's a life change that happens. And if you can teach your kids Jesus, and then all of a sudden you respect them to have Jesus in their life, and they respect you to have Jesus in your life, then the next thing you know, you're trying to help them win, and they're trying to help you win, and then there's harmony in the home. But when they don't have Jesus, there's one of two things that haven't happened yet. You haven't done your job packing their bag, or they hadn't been paying attention, or it's just not that time quite yet. So one of three things. So phase one, discipline. These are the discipline years. Teaching them right and wrong. This whole idea of just, hey buddy, you're a winner. Yes, sweetheart, you can sing. Like, I want to be honest with my kids, right? I want to teach them things. Buddy, you got a face for radio, you know? But your voice is incredible. I'm not talking about you, Jace. Just kidding. Stage 2. These are the training years, parenting 5 to 12 years old. For this age group, we also concentrated on putting the why behind the what of the family and the rules and the expectations. So here's the deal. Like, a lot of times our kids will know what to do, right? Hey, don't yell in here. Inside voice. But the problem is that when they get to a certain age, they're still operating on the what to do, and they don't really know the why. And if they don't know the why, then they'll never be able to do that without you hovering over their shoulder. Just yesterday, my middle son had a baseball game, and we were talking about baseball, and they're 9 years old, and they're playing ball, and they're doing things. A lot of them are doing things because they know the what, but they still get caught up and like kind of confused, right? They're in between bases, or they don't know where to throw it, or something like that maybe, or there's just something they might get confused about. And the reason that they're getting confused is not that they don't know how to throw the ball or how to swing the bat or all those types of things. They just don't know why they need to do certain things at certain times. And if we don't know the why, then we can never operate with full confidence if we just know the what. So this is the stage of life where you got to start explaining the why. Hey, let me tell you why we do this, buddy. Hey, sweetheart, let me tell you why we do this. The reason that we do this, the reason that we bless our food at the table is not because it's a habit. The reason that we bless our food at the table is because we believe that God has given us everything we have. And that He has blessed us so much that we have an abundance of food at our table. And then when we walk away, sometimes we're sinful walking away, right? It's like, hey, this is the why we do this. Let me tell you why we work hard at school. It's because every time we're at school, when we choose not to work hard, it's not just our name at stake, it's God's name at stake. Because people know that you claim to be a Christian, and when you're lazy at school, they're like, oh yeah, all Christians are that way. So you represent your Heavenly Father. And man, God never was lazy for you, so let's not be lazy in school. Well, Dad, what about times when I am lazy? Buddy, that's okay. I mean, we all have those days, but that's the days we learn. We don't stay in those moments. It's the what and the why. They have to know the why. Next stage, coaching years. Parenting 12 to 18 years old. Parenting happens a bit more through our advice from the sidelines. This is a hard thing for parents to do, to sit on the sidelines. But it happens more through advice from the sidelines while the relationship moves towards connecting rather than correcting. Like you're trying to connect with your teenager. And if you've done these first phases right, then you can connect with your teenager instead of constantly feeling like you have to correct them. But if you're waiting until they're a teenager to correct them all the time, it's not that you're not ever going to have to correct your teenager. Those of you who are parents of teenagers know that that's not true, all right? But there's a way that you can connect with your teenager because you're explaining the whys, you're explaining the whats, and you're being able to talk almost like a little bit more like an adult. I can remember some of the first adult conversations I had with my father, and it made me feel like I was somebody. It made me feel like I was somebody. I was able to ask some hard questions that he was honest with me with. He didn't pull any punches. I didn't want him to, and which has made me feel like now as an adult that I can go to my father and I can say, hey, let me ask you a question, Dad. And I'm sure that when he hears that, sometimes he's like, oh no. It's like, what's coming now, right? I thought I was done with these questions. Same thing with my mom. Like being able to have an adult conversation with her instead of just being like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. It's a respect level now. These are the coaching years. You get to coach from the sidelines a little bit. And then the last stage is the friendship years. The friendship years. This is when you parent adult children. As adults, we enjoy one another's company and process life together. If you get these stages right beforehand, if you're present beforehand, you can enjoy this time of life. So here's the deal, and this is heartbreaking, and I don't want you to walk out of here feeling beat up, okay? But listen, I know that there's some of you in here today, and you're thinking, I wish that was the case. And there's a little bit of conviction there because you're thinking, man, maybe I wish I would have heard this several years back. Or maybe I wish I would have made better decisions then so that I could have been more present for them then so that we could experience this now. But God has a way of working things out. God has grace that He can extend, but we reap what we sow. And if I told you any different just to make you feel better when you left, it would be a lie. But it doesn't mean that you can't start today doing something different. I don't have a ton of time to go into that, and I apologize for those of you who are in that boat. So what is the child's role in all of this? Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Children, say it with me. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Obey your parents. Here's the definition of obey. Comply with the command, direction, or request of a person or law submitted to the authority of. So in other words, hey, I am going to obey what you say. Whatever you tell me to do is what I'm going to do. I'm going to obey what you say because I'm going to trust that you have my best interest in hand. And Chris, what if you got bad parents that's telling you to do bad things? Now, I feel like God's given you a brain to think with and a heart to know what God's called you to do. But in the end, God has given you parents over your life for a reason. You weren't born into that family by accident. And they will not be an excuse for you to make stupid decisions later. But we're supposed to honor and obey. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 2, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. This is part of the 10 commandments, the golden 10, right? Honor your father and your mother. The first commandment in the 10 commandments that came with a promise. And look what the promise said. Honor your father and your mother, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land, that you may live long on the earth. Isn't that crazy? If you honor your father and your mother, that you'll live a long time. You don't have to diet. You don't have to exercise. You just have to honor your father and your mother. No, seriously, like honor your father and your mother. And there's a promise that comes along with that. This word honor it simply means respect. It's crazy, isn't it? Respect is a common theme in the makeup of a family. That you have to respect one another. Honor your father and your mother. Respect them. If you respect your parents, you will have more freedom. Kids, if you respect your parents, when you're under the authority of your parents, you will have more freedom than you'll ever know. Because they will know that even when you're out on your own, in that car, on the date, that you are going to respect what they wish for you. And they'll give you more freedom. Freedom comes with respect, doesn't it? You screw up that respect, and there's less freedom. If you give them a reason to respect you, they will respect you. And as a matter of fact, here's the deal. They respect you until you give them a reason not to. Innocent until proven guilty, right? They will give you more freedom. In my preparation for speaking to children, which we all are, by the way, like when I prepare to speak to children like this, when I say children, like this is everybody, okay? Like we're all children. We established that at the very beginning. But in my preparation to speaking to kids, 6 or teenagers, probably better to say in here, 6 to 12th grade, there wasn't ever any direction given without paired with direction for parenting. Like in my preparation of studying God's Word, there was never any preparation. Like it wasn't, hey, kids do this, and then that's it. Everything Scripture has to say about kids doing something was paired with how well we should be parenting. Because they are here to soak up and they're here to sponge up everything that we have. They're here for us to pack their bag. And here's the crazy thing, here's the convicting thing, parents. If they're acting a certain way, there's a good chance we pack their bag with that tool. If they're being disrespectful, then there's a good chance they've seen you be disrespectful. If they're being dishonest, there's a good chance they've seen you be dishonest. If they're being like just kind of greedy and sassy, there's a good chance they've seen you that way. There's a good chance that you've looked at them and go, oh, that's kind of cute. Like there's a phase like 0 to 5 years old, they say something bad and you're like, that's hilarious, right? But when they get to be like 14 years old and they say that same thing, you want to slap them, right? But the problem is because you said, oh, that's hilarious. By the time they were 10 years old, you were still laughing at the same joke. And we packed their bags with that. There was never Never that. So look, this scripture is no different. It says, children, honor your father and your mother, obey your parents. But then it goes on in verse 4 to say this, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Love them, teach them, inspire them, be honest with them, correct them, discipline them. I don't want to deal with your kids when they haven't been disciplined. Nobody does. And there's a good chance. Hey, can I just be, I'm transparent right at this moment, okay? I'll turn off my transparency here in just a second. I don't want to deal with you as an adult if you weren't disciplined. You're annoying. I'm just being honest. It's aggravating. We got to pack their bags. Like this idea is so important to me that I feel like that even like as I speak to you guys, I want you to know that Kenneth and I don't get this right all the time. We're still like this is something, we're not perfect parents. We strive for it all the time and we fail miserably. There's times when we look at each other with tears in our eyes like, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, where's the owner's manual, right? Like, I feel like we're failing horribly. But I do think that it's our responsibility to pack their bags. So in preparation for this, me and Kenneth were sitting at our dinner table, and I called my kids down one at a time. I called Jace down first. And I said, hey, buddy, what's your role in our family? Now, Jace is my oldest. He's 12 years old. He's going to be 13 soon, 6th grader. And this was Jace's response. He said, to be responsible. I should have filmed it for you because me and Kenneth were too busy crying when he said it. To be responsible. He said, to help. I'm supposed to help y'all. He said, to be kind. And then he said to protect and teach Cade and Marley. It's my responsibility as the older brother. And he said, don't get me wrong, Mom and Dad, and this was awesome. He said, I know it's y'all's job to teach them. But I feel like it's my role as the older brother to teach them and protect them. And then the last thing he said to me, I hope gives you some insight on some of your kids. He said, it's my job to be myself. And we said, what does that mean? He said, well, sometimes, like Cade's really good at baseball. And I think as his older brother, I'm supposed to be better than him. But I'm not as interested in baseball as he is in baseball. God gave me the interest in flying and instruments and my studies. And it's okay for me to be me. And that's my role. I need to be me. So when Kenneth and I quit sobbing, we told him to get out of our face and stop making us cry. And said, go get your brother and send him down here. So Cade gets down here, and he's a little bit younger. He's in 4th grade, and he is, am I wrong on that? I just got to look. I just got nervous. I don't know what grade my kid's in. Cade's in 4th grade, and we asked him the same question. Hey, buddy, what's your role in our family? He said, to listen to my parents and coaches. I said, that's good, man. What else? He said, I feel like it's my responsibility to take care of Marley, to look after Marley. There's a little boy that made fun of Marley's lunchbox at school. And I'm proud and not proud that Cade threatened him to not ever say anything to his sister again. The boy was actually older than him, and he looked at him and said, don't ever talk to my sister again. So I took him out for dinner and ice cream that night. He said, it's my job to look after Marley. And then he said to make good decisions and to do good in school and baseball. That's my role, Dad. That's how I see things. That's my perception. And I said, man, that's awesome. I sent him upstairs to get Marley. and Marley's about to be 7, which makes me sick. But it's going to be the best year of our life. I said, Marley, what do you think that Mama and Daddy expects of you? What do you think that we want you to do? Like, what is your role? And I put it in her terms. Canette and I put it in her terms. She said, to play school, because she loves playing school. And then she said, to clean up my stuff. And she looked down. She had some shoes there, and she looked up at me. And she went like that. You see, at different stages, there's a different mentality and a different way that they soak things in. Marley's still at the what. Kate is getting closer to the why. And Jace is most definitely at the why. This is why we do things. And if we don't pay attention, if we're not intentional, somebody else will pack their bag. But we have been given the responsibility and the privilege of packing their bag. So, let me just ask you 2 questions. What is your role in your family? And parents, what are you packing their bags with? Because what you choose to do now matters more than you could possibly imagine later. So here's what I want to do. And some of you guys, you may say, I feel uncomfortable with that and whatever. Suck it up, okay? You can use your chairs. But I would really encourage you, if your kids are here, maybe they're in the back and you just want to pray with them, husband and wife, I would really just beg you to pray that God would make clear to you your role in your family. If you're a teenager, come pray with your family, with your parents. God, make it clear what my role is now in my family. We're going to have an invitation time. If you're a parent, grab your kids, pray with them. Man, one of the most intimate things that we can do is pray with one another. Pray with them. Maybe your kids aren't here, maybe your spouse isn't here, that's okay. But use this time to say, God, what is your role for me and my family? You guys stand with me.